Is it reasonable to believe in the existence of God? And what about science? Does it support or not support belief in a creator? And what about the honest questions that agnostics and atheists ask? Are there reasonable answers to those questions? Come explore with us the controversial topic of God, fact or fiction. Welcome to a respectful conversation about the existence of God. My guest today is Subodh Pandit, who is a physician. He's a fascinating person. He's from India. He is the author of a couple of books that I've read, both of them, cover to cover. Very interesting. Book one is called Does God Really Exist? The subtitle is Theism Rational? Is Evolution Truly Scientific? And then book two is called The Weight of Evidence. And the subtitle is Religions Compared Candidly, the Basis for Belief. Both of these books have an umbrella title called Come Search With Me. Subodh Pandit is the president of an organization called Search Seminars International. He's traveled the world over and he's spoken at university campuses, and he talks to students about the big issues of God, evolution, faith, science, and he's a very interesting man. So, Subodh, thank you for being here with me.
My pleasure. Great to be here, Steve.
Yes, you've been here for a couple days, and the weather's cold outside right now. You're in the snowy land of North Idaho.
Very different from where I come from. I mean, not so different, but quite different.
Yes. Well, yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles, and so this is very different too for me. But I've lived here for the last almost 10 years, and I've come to enjoy all the seasons. So anyway, let's just get right into I want to have people get to know you a little better, and then we'll talk about the 13-part series that we've just finished, that you've just finished. So just tell us a little bit about your background and what you do.
Professionally, I'm a medical doctor, specialist in internal medicine. I was born and brought up in India. Now, India really is a land of tremendous diversity. Food, language, culture, religion. It has the largest population of Hindus. Very few people realize that India has about the second largest population of Muslims. We have more Muslims in India than the whole Arabian Peninsula put together. Jainism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism. So that is the background where I grew up. Mm-hmm. So naturally, I had a lot of questions when I was growing up. And I did ask them, went on asking people, kept notes on what they said. And that is what I put together in the presentation that I make. And part of that came into our 13-part series here.
Mm-hmm. Now, your specialty as a physician is what? Internal
medicine. But for the last 10 years of my practice, I was an emergency room doctor, an internist in the emergency room doc.
Okay, and so what, as a doctor, now you are a speaker and you're an author, and you're the president of Search Seminars, and you're tackling the big issues of whether there's a God or not. How did you shift from one to the other?
In one sense, it was not a shift. Like I said, I grew up in that crucible of mixture. And these questions kept in the back of my mind playing over and over again. And so when I finished medical school, I decided to let those questions come to the fore and see if I could tackle those questions and if there was a reasonable answer to those big questions that really vex a lot of people, including me. So I didn't really shift out. I just added this to what I was doing.
Okay.
And as I was practicing, I would speak to people and get to this topic as well. And since this was interesting, and a lot of information came in, I just slowly transitioned to have a focus on this later on.
Now, do you still consider yourself to be a searcher, or have you arrived? Do you now have all the answers? You've got it all sewed up, and
that is an interesting question. You know what I found when I was doing this search? That the attitude of a seeker or an inquirer is one of the most delightful attitudes one can have. And even as you find things, you realize that there's something more that you can get to. But I have to state that, once you ask a question and you come to a certain conclusion because of the information and the evidence, then at that point you can make a decision. But that does not mean you have stopped searching. So that's where I am. I had asked some questions, looked for the evidences. Hey, there's some good evidence to answer my question. So I have made up my mind on those points, but I'm always going to be an inquirer.
Yeah, that's good. It seems to me that when you talk to somebody that gives the impression that they know everything, it doesn't really speak well for them as a person. And I think we all struggle with a certain amount of pride, and we have a tendency as humans to talk as if we really know a lot, when sometimes we don't know exactly what we're talking about.
But Steve, that's a common thing all over the world.
That's right. That's what I said. It's a tendency of humanity. And so for a person to adopt a humble posture, I think that goes a long way.
But if you just turn your eyes to where we are, this world is bitty and small compared to our solar system, compared to our galaxy, and compared to the universe. So actually we still are very, very small, and all that we can possibly put together in the whole human race is still a small bit of what there is. Yeah. So we will should be humble and an inquirer.
That's good. Excellent. Now give us just a quick overview. You've just finished recording 13 programs that delve into some of the content that's in your books, and you branch out into different areas dealing with the existence or non-existence of God, and arguments for and against, and things like that. So just, talk to us a little bit about kind of an overview of what this 13-part series is about.
The base really should be set. And when I looked around the world, I found that most of the debates and discussions would not end with a conclusive ending. It was always an unsatisfying ending in which neither side wins. So when I looked into that, I realized that one of the things that that causes this is that there's a lack of agreement on both sides on what the premise or the base should be. The base must be set by factors that both sides agree. So that's what I honestly and always do when I present this. And in this 13-part series, that's also what I did. Make a base. And then from that we went on to, how do we know there's a God? The only real credible way is to look into the information we have, scientific information, and then use common sense and reason and logic. So with that, the next question I tackled was the question of evolution. Is that really credible? Because most people believe in it. So after we settled that, I went to the other question of pluralism, which says that all the religions are really the same in value. It didn't seem possible, but when I looked into it, yep, that's what they were saying. It didn't pan out from the writings of the different religions. So when I saw that, I realized, well, let's look at the religions themselves. And then the test or the examination of these 5 great world religions: Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, and Christianity. So that's is the thumbnail of all the things that we did in the 13 series.
And you mentioned certain things that didn't pan out. And I know part of your name is or Pandit. Pandit or Pandit?
Pandit.
Pandit. And you've done a little sort of a tongue-in-cheek where you created a term for a process that you have, that you believe in, and just explain that a little bit to us.
I use that process in my search. It's called the PAN process. PAN means going across, like the Pan American Airlines or the Pan African Games. You don't stay on one side. In other words, whenever there's a controversial topic, look at both, not just one.
Okay.
So you go across. Pan also refers to the process of sifting, like those who panned for gold during the gold rush. That's the process in which you move away from the ordinary and keep the special nuggets, in this case, nuggets of knowledge. And the third was what you just mentioned, the first three letters of my family name, Pandit. That's because I really formulated that because I wanted to be fair in what I was doing, so that it would give me satisfaction that what I did was really balanced and fair. So the PAN process looks at any option out there that people can bring, and we look at all the theories and look at them equally.
Okay, so you look at such as the theory or the belief in the existence of God, and then you look at the pros and the cons, right? You look at both sides, and you do the same thing with atheism, pros and cons, and you put it all out on the table, and you explore the different options and take a close look at them.
That's exactly it. And once you see that, there's at least one thing you'll have to agree, that the attempt is to be absolutely fair and even balanced.
Okay, and in your books you mentioned, and we've discussed this, that bias is a big issue in one's ability to candidly look at the options. Just to comment on that a little bit.
Well, it's common. And the best thing to do when something is that common is to acknowledge it. So once you confess that you are biased, you address it. And the way you address is to say, actually, I don't want to be biased. And so we make a conscious decision of not being biased, but that's not easy. So I formulated the next step. If you really want to stay as an inquirer who is even and fair, then you need help. And what you need, and the factors that help you, are four: humility, honesty, calmness, and respect. If we employ all these four, I think we'll get to the closest point of being as unbiased as possible.
As possible. And we can make progress.
Yes.
In an honest discussion without having to bang each other over the head because we don't agree with each other. We can try to put our biases aside, and we can have an honest, humble conversation.
And if you speak to one, he knows that you are attempting to be unbiased, so he respects and gives you credibility.
Talk to us a little bit about Charles Darwin. I know you mentioned that you talk about Darwin in your book, your first book especially, and I read that book twice. There was so much information, and everybody knows that Darwin is a major force when it comes to the issue of evolution, and I found some of the things that you said were extremely just enlightening. So just talk to us a little bit about Darwin.
First of all, Charles Darwin, we should give him the credit that is due him. He honestly wanted to be a true scientist. He tried to put things together in such a way that it would make scientific sense. And so if you read the book, and by the way, I have read that book at least 6 times before I started even jotting down my comments on that book.
And that's Origin of Species.
Origin of Species. Because it's not easy to go through it with just one reading. You go through it, you have to read it again. I did it about 5 or 6 times. I appreciated his attempt at being a scientist. If you read the book, he will clearly tell you this is what he means to find. This is what he was setting out to do. And this is what he did not do. In the book, the point really being that as a scientist, he really put that down. So if we today read it, we should be able to see what he was trying to do and what he was unable to do. The problem today is that people take the point that he was not able to do and state that he did it.
And what was that point?
The point was that he stated very clearly that he wanted all the classification, the biological classification, to have occurred by itself. That was his aim. And he got it from his own work in breeding experiments. And he bred a lot of stuff. I mean, horses and pigeons and sheep and even plants. And from that he realized that you could possibly get a form or an organism that was better than the previous one by just interbreeding. So he extrapolated that and said, oh, that is what happens in nature. So if that happens in nature, well, we don't need God at all to do anything out there. However, he really believed that there was a supernatural being, because the last sentence in his book, the last sentence, he is making a confession as to how life came on this earth. And he says, maybe that first organism had life breathed into it by the Creator. That's amazing for a person who we now call as a person who clearly shows there is no God. No, he did believe in God.
He did believe in God. And you mentioned a little while ago, as we were talking privately, that the place of his burial is significant as well.
Yes, he is buried today in Westminster Abbey. That's the Church of England. The fact is, he went to church every week. He was a good church goer. And he wrote to one of his friends, saying that when he does his experiments here, he has one frame of mind, but when he looks up into the sky and into the whole universe and cosmos, he says, hard to believe that it came by itself. In fact, he says it compels him to look to a first cause that had a mind that was similar to a human mind. And he says, well, if that's the case, I deserve to be called a believer.
And you explore more of this in the 13-part series.
More of what he really says, and especially whether what he says can meet the criteria of it being truly a scientific theory.
I mean, the movement from selective breeding to natural selection.
Oh yeah, that's a really big point, because he says in breeding, he established the absolute importance of the presence of the breeder. Then when he goes to the nature, inexplicably, he leaves out the breeder. There's no breeder there. So that was my question. Did you find the breeder out there? And when you read the whole book, actually there is no breeder. He puts natural selection in the place of the breeder. But a breeder is alive and he can think and take action and choose. Natural selection is just an idea. The idea doesn't have life and make perceptions and conceptions. So that was, I thought, a big drawback to the way in which he tried to put those two together.
Okay, now you've done, as I mentioned, you've done a lot of traveling. Where have your travels taken you as you've discussed these issues?
Oh, my main audience has been actually on secular university campuses. I speak to mixed audiences of all kinds of people when they come, and we have a good work. And so I have been to quite a few universities. Such as? Well, Boston claims that is the intellectual capital of the world, and I've been there 8 times, 4 times to MIT. It's arguably one of the best technological universities in the world. We still have Nobel laureates coming out from there. Harvard, Duke, UNC Chapel Hill, Michigan Tech, Georgia Tech, University of Florida, and out to the west, UC Davis in California. So I've been all over the United States and also around the world, been to 5 continents on just invitation, mainly to the university campuses.
So how do you get invited to these campuses?
Well, most of the places, they have student clubs which are connected and registered with the university, and student clubs are allowed to call whoever they want to as speakers. And so when they have heard about me, they call me as a speaker to their student clubs, and they call the other students to come and hear me.
And you told me that what you enjoy most about those discussions is not just your lecture, but it's the Q&A.
Q&A is the place where you can have a real back and forth. And I enjoy that the most, because that's where the people ask their real questions. And I just enjoy being asked a question whether I can answer it or not, because it makes me think. And that's what I keep telling them. In fact, the most common response when I have finished my seminar at the university campuses, they'll come up and tell me, "Man, you made me think." And I say, "Good, that's all I want you to do."
Can you share any just quick, interesting experience?
Yeah, I was at MIT, and we had a discussion with the Atheistic Club. They sent their representative, and he wanted a debate. I usually prefer to have a discussion. He said a debate, so I said, okay. He spoke for half an hour, I spoke for half an hour, and then we questioned each other, and then we threw open the discussion to the floor. There was a Chinese girl who had just come from China, joined MIT, who in her background was a complete, total atheist, did not even know how to describe God at all. And she had come there and been confused about why people in America go to church, and why do they pray to God. Well, she came to the discussion we had, the actual debate, and she was one of in the audience. And when it was all over, she said, "I want to speak to him," meaning me. She came and sat down and said, "I have been an atheist my whole life. In fact, I did not even know the words to use to ask my questions. Wow. And when I was sitting here, you were putting on the screen the very questions I had, and you answered them." And then she looked at me and she said, "I am no longer an atheist, because the points you made seem credible and reasonable."
Wow. Well, yeah. There's no question in my mind that this man has a lot of expertise. He knows what he's talking about. His 2 books are very, very clear on the information that he has, and this information is very valuable. And just to let you know that Subodh has just recorded a 13-part television series that deals with many issues, just like what you've gotten a little window into his heart and what these discussions are all about. This series is available for people to watch anywhere around the world for a very inexpensive price on the website godfactorfiction.com. We also have this series available on DVD. And then we also have his books that are available from White Horse Media, and we just want to invite those that are interested, those that are searching, those who have questions, those who want to find out more about what this fascinating person has to say. Subodh Pandit, the president of Search Internationals.
Search Seminars International.
Search Seminars Internationals, yes. And so we just encourage you, if you're interested, to check out godfactorfiction.com. Subodh, do you have anything that you want to say to just you and the audience that are watching this, to encourage them to check out the series, check out your books, or just give you the time of day to have a chance to share?
This is what I would tell you. Don't ever be afraid of searching out for the truth of any matter. It doesn't matter whether it's a big question or a small question. Look for what will impress you the most. Make a little base in which you will say, okay, if it is this, then I will believe. If it is that, well, I'll reduce the credibility over there. Do not ever be afraid of searching and continuing to search, because if you do that, then your own mind will expand, and you will come across information that will affect your mind and your whole life. I believe anyone who really wants to know the truth of the matter will come to it if you take simple, reasonable steps. So do that, and I will wish you, may the source of truth guide you to the point of fulfillment in whatever your search is.
Thank you. And one more question. The conclusions that you've come to, what have they done for you personally? Have they benefited your life? Have they made you a happier person, more content?
That's an amazing and good question to ask. The reason I kept on doing it, because at every step I would come across certain bits of information that really affected my life. It will affect anyone. If you're an inquirer, And you come to a place where you say, oh, this is it. You feel so fulfilled, you really want to go to the next one as well. And so at every step, it was something affecting me. So finally, when I did come to a place where I could say, so this is the answer to that question I had. When I realized that, I almost jumped out of my chair. It was so exciting. Mm-hmm. And even today, when I think back, I say, hey, that's the way to live. And so I have reached some places. I still have places to go.
Yeah, well, you look like a very happy person.
I'm immensely pleased with and actually a sense of contentment. Because now here's a base on which you can build. In other words, a firm foundation. A firm foundation is so important to live in these times when everything seems to be chaotic everywhere.
That's right. And there's so many people. I just read a recent news story about a couple. They were friends in their 20s, I believe, or maybe early 30s. And they both took their lives together in a hotel room, and they left a note. They left a tip for the house cleaner, a note that said, don't come into this room, because if you do, you'll find us that we're dead. And one of the reasons in the news report listed was that they were both deeply depressed. And if you just look at this world, you know, people are depressed, they're discouraged, they're confused. And if there was ever a time when hope is needed, yes. And that's what you have to talk about is hope, it's now.
So what if there really is a God who loves you and really wishes the best for you? If he's a king on this earth, we'd say, hey, wow, wonderful. He's not just the king, he's God. So in other words, the attributes of his are omnipotent, that means all-powerful. He knows everything. He has everything in his hands. If he is loving and he is on your side, your life is just stable.
That's right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And so, if you are interested in learning more about this discussion, this conversation, looking at the evidence for and against, and learning more what Subodh Pandit has to say, then we encourage you to go to the website godfactorfiction.com and come search with us and see where the journey will take you. You might be surprised that it will be good for you.
If you have enjoyed this presentation with Dr. Subodh Pandit and wish to watch more of this unique 13-part series for free online, visit the website godfactorfiction.com. That's godfactorfiction.com. If you would like to order this fascinating series on DVD, it is now available from Whitehorse Media. To order from within the U.S., call 1-800-782-4253. Dr. Subodh Pandit has written 2 eye-opening books entitled Come Search With Me, Does God Really Exist? And Come Search With Me, The Weight of Evidence, which further explore the topics of evolution, theism, atheism, and religion. To order these books from within the U.S., call 1-800-782-4253. That's 1-800-782-4253. If you live outside the U.S., you may also easily order them on Amazon.com.